Again, my name is Gwen Sorley, and we will be talking today about emotion regulation. We all experience emotions. And as a matter of fact, I'd like you to share some of your emotions. If you would chat in the or type in the chat box, what are some of your emotional triggers? Perhaps you have experienced a situation or you have a certain trigger that you know of where your emotion seems to take over. Have you experienced that? Or maybe it's your partner, or maybe it is your child. Perhaps you have clients who have difficulties or strong emotions. And the reason I'm asking you to type those in, because I think it's important for everyone to understand that emotions, they happen. It is part of our human experience. And a lot of you are typing in some responses, and I'm going to share some of the responses. Joanna says one of her triggers is being yelled at. Um, Melissa says dysregulated children. Lynn says when child refuses to do something. I bet a lot of you are relating to each other on these comments. Vanessa, when people are passive aggressive, it triggers some anger and frustration. Jennifer, my screaming kids trigger my emotions. Uh, Marietta, loss, sadness, anger, fear, anxiety. Cynthia has been experiencing disappointment. Kim says one of her triggers are new situations. Sally says being dismissed. Les, when people don't let me finish a sentence, walk on me. Alexandra, child refusing to listen. Melissa, when my child talks back. Tanisha, being ignored. Vanessa, being tired can make me more emotional. Good point. Jennifer, being ignored. Judy, being ignored. Rejection. A lot of you are saying being ignored. Melissa, tired, hungry, basic needs not met. Joanna, sexism, racism, disrespect to members of marginalized group. Ron, feeling like I'm being taken advantage of. Gina, cut off and disregarded. All of you typed in such great examples, and it just shows you, just from the ones that I've been able to read to you today, that emotions are part of our experience as a human. We all experience emotions. However, even though we all experience emotions, as far as we can remember, when we're very young, we are encouraged to suppress our emotions. We're told, don't cry. There's nothing to be so upset about. We've heard it for years, and then we're guilty of it ourselves, right? We'll look at a friend or a family member and say, don't get so upset. And usually when people tell us not to be so upset or try to get us to ignore our emotions get that much more heightened, right? So it's important that we understand that it is okay to experience emotions. Experiencing emotions is an important part of our development. Emotions help us communicate with each other, right? If you are feeling sad, you can then talk to someone about your sadness. You can ask for help. Emotions allow us to communicate both verbally and non-verbally. They allow us to act quickly. If you're walking down a street and suddenly you see a car coming towards you very fast, you feel fear. And because you feel that fear, you're able to jump out of the way very quickly. You're able to respond and react quickly because you had that emotion. They are critical to developing empathy. If you experience emotions, then you can be empathetic and understanding towards others when they are going through certain situations or experiencing those emotions. They can help us make decisions. There's research that shows that when individuals experience traumatic brain injuries and they lose the ability to experience emotions, they have a decreased ability to make good decisions. So emotions do influence our decision making, and they are strongly connected to our memories. If you think about your memories, they're not a list of bullet points, are they? They're colored with emotion. That is why it is easier to remember times when you were experiencing great joy or great sadness. Those memories are tied to emotions. Those events are easier to remember because you had an emotional response. So emotions are very important to our development. So our focus should be less on learning how to suppress our emotions and more on understanding our emotions and how to experience emotions without allowing them to overwhelm us. If you look at your internal emotion meter will allow you to identify the emotions you are experiencing and also identify how much control you have over those emotions. So, on one end of the spectrum, you may be experiencing great joy, great happiness. On the other end of that emotion meter, you may be experiencing great anger or overwhelming anger. The question is, when you get to these times of extreme emotions, do you have the cognitive control it takes in order to respond appropriately? And that's what we're going to focus on today, identifying those times and understanding how we can use cognitive control so that our emotions don't take over. The brain is responsible for governing our emotions. So it's important that you remember you cannot change the way you feel by simply willing that emotion away, right? Like we were talking about earlier, there's nothing to be so upset about. Don't cry, right? We can't just simply will the emotion away. However, we can influence the way we feel by modifying our thoughts and our behaviors. Emotion regulation is part of executive function that helps us decrease the magnitude of these emotions and how intensely we feel them. So if we're able to dial down that emotion on our emotion meter, then we can really experience the emotion without it overwhelming us. So it is our emotion regulation, our emotion meter, which is internal, and it is controlled by executive function. So since it is part of executive function, let's look a little bit closer at the areas of the brain and how they are responsible to help us when we are experiencing extreme emotions. If we look at the amygdala, and you can see it's highlighted here, the amygdala you can think of as the governor of your emotion regulation. When you're experiencing times of emotion, stress, anxiety, fear, anger, it is the amygdala's job to send messages to the frontal lobes as far as how to respond to that situation. So the amygdala takes the information and sends a message to the frontal lobe, telling the frontal lobes how to actually process and respond. So the frontal lobe governs that message. And if you look at the frontal lobe, which is highlighted here, the frontal lobes encompass what is collectively known as executive function. And many of you here today are very familiar with executive function. Tanisha said, my amygdala was not working yesterday evening because I lost it. So your amygdala went into fight or flight, right? It didn't send that message to the frontal lobes to allow it to process the information and respond appropriately. And we're going to talk about that when you lose it, right? When the amygdala goes into that fight or flight. Good point, Tanisha. So again, if we look at the frontal lobes, they encompass executive function. And executive function is a set of mental processes that include attention, reasoning, judgment, planning, problem solving, organization, emotion regulation, impulse control, mental flexibility, and self-monitoring. So as you look at that list, you can see how important all of those mental processes are and when it comes to controlling your emotions. So the frontal lobes actually allow you to take that information from the amygdala, that message that was sent, and allows you to process the information and put on what we call your mental brakes. It allows you to slow down and respond appropriately so that the emotion does not overwhelm you. So when we talk about, I just want to improve emotion regulation, I talk to a lot of parents who will say, I just wish my child could control their emotions. Or maybe you talk about your partner. I wish my partner was better at emotion regulation. Or your clients, you want to help them with emotion regulation. But when we talk about improving emotion regulation, it's not just one thing. Emotion regulation is actually a series of multiple cognitive skills that work together. So it's not just one thing. If you look on the screen, you'll see it's a series of multiple cognitive skills that have to work together in order for you to be able to have that emotion control. Processing is important. You have to be able to process and understand what's going on. And I know many of you here today probably have a child or perhaps clients who are slow processors. Attention is also important, that you're able to stay calm and focused in order to decide what to do or how to respond. Planning, think through the consequences of each response or each possible response. Mental flexibility, follow through with the action. And you also have to be able to control your impulsivity, control impulsive behaviors throughout this entire process. And probably many of you who have children who have difficulty with emotion regulation see that impulse control really get in the way, right? Where something happens, they're unable to process all of the information and they simply quickly respond. They just impulsively respond. So in order to improve emotion regulation, we have to have all of these skills working together. And if you look at this list and really reflect on this list, what do you notice? Or what are some of your concerns when you look at all of these other areas broken down as part of emotion regulation? Do these areas, these cognitive skills, concern anyone? Just going to give you a moment to reflect on all of those different. Ron says, how is anyone able to do it? And Alexandra says, yes, I lack all of them. And that's what I was going to say, Alexandra, is that all of these cognitive skill areas are typically weakest for people with ADHD. Colleen says, all of them concern me. It seems without processing, the rest won't work. Exactly. Without any of these items, the rest really don't work, do they? And Kim said, so much like my son. Tanisha says, definitely impulse control. So I hope this gives us a broader understanding of emotion regulation. It's not just one skill we have to improve. It's a combination of skills that we really need to focus on and improve. And to make it much more difficult, not only are these skills difficult for individuals with ADHD, but in the heat of the moment, emotions often override your executive function. And that is why we probably have all experienced this. I was listening to one speaker and he said that emotions make us stupid. And we can all relate, right? We've all had that moment when we have had a huge emotional response. And then later, when we actually allowed our frontal lobes, our executive function, to process the information and really reflect on what happened, we think, why did we do that, right? Why did I do that? That was so stupid. Why did I respond that way? And that's because the emotions override our executive function. And those cognitive skills that we just chatted about have a difficult time working together. And then we just have that huge emotional response. So in order to improve executive function, in order to improve emotion regulation, we have to improve specific cognitive skills and executive function. And there's no magic cure. There's no magic pill that can help us overnight. We have to really work at this. We have to have due consideration and practice. So I want to provide you with some exercises you can do so that you can improve emotion regulation. And these exercises are things you can do yourself personally, or you can do with your family or with your clients, your students. These are exercises that you can do to help support better emotion regulation. One is to make a plan. If you have no plan, remember you are expecting yourself or your child to use all of these cognitive skills in the heat of the moment. And remember, we just chatted about how the heat of the moment, the emotions take over and executive function does not take over. So it makes it more difficult. So it's very important that we have a plan in place. Now, I'm sure that many of you have some strategies that you have already come up with, maybe for yourself or for your child, maybe as a family or for your clients, you may have developed some strategies. I've listed some here. What are some of your plans? Type them in the chat box. Let me know so we can share them. Everyone usually has great ideas. What are some of your strategies that you use or you ask your child to use when emotions are starting to take over? Jennifer says, walk the dog. I had down here, I had pet your dog, I think. Jennifer says, hit a punching bag. Maria says, meditation. Let's see. Ron says, deep breathing. Andrea says, stop and breathe. Take a bubble bath. Count to 10. Push-ups, breathing, yell in the pillow. Beth says, speak the emotions. It's safe. Oh my goodness, you all have such great ideas. I will have to incorporate these into a future ebook as well. Colleen says, read a novel that takes my mind away temporarily. Even just a couple of paragraphs works. That's a great idea. Coloring or painting. Tanisha, bounce on her ball. Alexandra, workout. Excellent. So you all, exercise is a great regulator. Brian says, ride my bike. Myron, redirect to tasks that I've been avoiding. I transfer emotions to dislike tasks. That's interesting. C says, pray. Margot says, practice noticing feelings. Excellent. And pressure points to the kidney meridian and look at a picture on my phone. Excellent. Joanna says, imagine a close, good friend providing comfort to regulate myself at the moment. What would X say here? Excellent. Andrea says, snack time. You all have such great ideas. And so you all have considered this, right? You've considered making a plan, but it's not enough just to have a list like I have here on the screen. We have to take it just a little bit further, right? So we have to discuss the plan as well as some coping strategies. So one thing you need to keep in mind, especially if you're chatting with your child or your clients about these strategies, is categorize them. What strategies can I use at home? What strategies can I use at work? What strategies can I use when I'm in an online meeting and I'm on screen and everyone can see me as my webinar has disappeared, right? So what strategies can you use in certain situations? And so it is really important to categorize them, because some of them, I think it was Joanna, I believe, who said she reads part of her novel, which I think is a great idea. And that's something I would definitely use. However, you can't do that when you're in a board meeting. So have different strategies for different situations. Then once you've categorized them, you've made your list, you've categorized them, you may want to consider developing a nonverbal prompt. And this is really important, especially for teachers and parents out there, or perhaps maybe you'd even have a nonverbal prompt with a partner or a friend, where you are giving that individual a prompt when it's appropriate to use one of these strategies, especially when you're at the beginning of this process and the other individual is not at a point where they're able to self-regulate and self-monitor. So maybe they're kind of unaware of when to use these strategies. You could have a nonverbal prompt. And I bet some of you had ideas for nonverbal prompts. I know many of you may put your finger on your nose, or a wink might be one of them, or you may just have a certain eye signal or a word even. So have a nonverbal prompt. That's usually the easiest way to not draw attention to what's going on for the other people. Practice the plan. So remember, we are expecting you to use this plan, use these strategies in the heat of the moment. So you should have time to actually practice the strategy. If you expect your child to do deep breathing exercises, then you should have time, maybe in the morning or after school, where you simply practice deep breathing. So that deep breathing becomes something that they know how to do and can go to that strategy easily. Kim says one of her nonverbal prompts is, in school, put a highlighter on the desk. That's perfect. Great idea. Then once you've practiced the plan and you are putting the plan into action, it's important that after the strategy is used, you have time to reflect. So this would be after that situation, make certain you reflect, talk about what went well. If you're doing this with your child or your partner or your clients, make certain you positively reinforce what went well. But you all have to be mentally flexible enough to make changes if necessary, right? Not all plans will work smoothly. So it may cause you to actually change the plan and make modifications. So make your list of strategies, categorize that list, make certain you have strategies for home, for school, for work, for online meetings, develop a nonverbal prompt, practice, and then allow time for reflection. If you bring all of this together, then in the heat of the moment, you're going to be better prepared to actually use these strategies. I also want to talk about words, because words do matter. When we look at a preliminary study from UCLA, it showed that when they showed individuals a picture of an angry face or a fearful face, the amygdala immediately went into fight or flight mode. So they showed people a picture of an angry face or fearful face, and then the amygdala went into fight or flight mode, which is that protective mode. It's the more primitive part of our brain, right? The brain is designed to protect us. So it went into that primitive mode. Now, what they found next is if they attached a word to the picture. So they showed an angry face, and then they attached the word angry to the picture. Then there was a decrease in the activity in the amygdala and an increase in the frontal lobes. And that individual was able to process and put on those mental brakes. So it is really important that we identify the emotions, because that actually allows the amygdala to move from that primitive fight or flight and send a message to the frontal lobes to process and kick in all those processes of executive function so that we can respond appropriately, so that we can put on those mental brakes and self-regulate. So if you think about that, it makes sense, because the unknown, just that picture, the unknown is scary, right? And that's why we go into that immediate fight or flight. However, when we identify it, then we have information we can work with. So many of you have probably heard about name it to tame it, right? That's a very popular term when we talk about emotion regulation. And that now makes sense, that if we identify the emotion, we name it, then we can work with that emotion. So one way that we can name your feelings is through a feelings folio. Again, you can do this individually, or you can do this with your family. First, you want to decide on how you are going to document your work. So you could use just a simple piece of paper, a journal, or maybe a Word document. Then you want to look up the definition of a word that describes an emotion you have felt recently. So it might be, or maybe not recently, but maybe often. It could be anger, fear, joy, anxiety. So write down your word and then look up the definition that describes that word. Then you're going to look up, after you look up the literal definition and write down that definition in your feelings folio, you're going to look up that word in a thesaurus. So you're going to write down the words, you're going to write down the literal definition, and then you're going to look at a thesaurus and find a synonym. Find other words that indicate either the exact same emotion or one very similar to it. So you have your words, you've named those emotions, you've put a label, identified the emotions, you've written the definition, and then you've come up with a synonym. And then think about, reflect how each addition to your feelings folio is described, and take a moment to remember a time when you felt that way. And remember, since it's a strong emotion, you will probably be able to remember an event that caused you to feel that way, because our memories are colored with our emotions. And then define what any given emotion means to you personally. The more aware you are of what you feel and how you emotionally react in concrete terms, the better you are at regulating that emotion. So this is called a feelings folio, where you're actually walking through this process and processing the information to help you better identify those emotions when they occur. Another example of words matter is our internal dialogue. Now, I know many of you here today are going to be attending next week's webinar. That is Attitude Magazine's webinar, and they're going to be talking, the speaker is going to be talking about scripts, words you can use. And that's going to be important for you. And the other thing for you to consider, though, are the words you say to yourself, your internal dialogue, because internal talk is highly related to how we respond to our stress, our fear, our strong emotions. So I'm certain that you can maybe relate to this situation or one very similar to it. Your child is at school. and she sees a couple of students whispering to each other. And immediately her internal dialogue starts going. Why are they talking about me? They're always talking behind my back. They're so mean to me. Why are they so mean to me? And she has this internal dialogue, which convinces her that they are talking about her behind her back. And then that internal dialogue causes her to have a huge emotional response. It may be such a big emotional response that it's very difficult for her to actually calm down. But once she calms down, the other students explain that they were not talking about her at all. They were just chatting about a birthday gift they had purchased for another friend. So a lot of times that internal dialogue really gets in the way of how we process information. So if you find that you are having huge responses to certain situations, and when you reflect later, you feel like you processed the information inappropriately or incorrectly, it's important that you become aware of that internal dialogue and how it's affecting your responses. There's a clear relationship of our internal dialogue and the way we process things. So if you can become more aware, if you can be mindful of that internal dialogue, it can help you instantly mitigate any out of control reactions. So I know that a few of you had written down that you do practice mindfulness or breathing when it comes to high emotions. And if you do practice daily moments, and it doesn't have to be long parts of your day, it doesn't have to be long periods, but if you do little daily moments of mindfulness, they can help you stay in the present moment, focus on what is truly happening at that time, process information, and quiet the internal and often incorrect dialogue that you're having. This is one idea that I came across, a personal weather report. And I thought this would be a good activity for you to do, again, on your own or with a friend or with family members. Have a personal weather report. Sit quietly and just start concentrating on your breathing. Okay. If you start concentrating on your breathing, then you can recognize when you're breathing in, when you're breathing out, and then you can start becoming mindful of your environment. Become mindful of little things around you. There can be some movement, but just be mindful of it, be aware of those movements and let it go. And then I want you to start becoming mindful of how you feel internally and report it as a weather report. Are you feeling sunny? Are you feeling stormy? Is it rainy internally? Is it a tornado? Just talk about or feel your emotions just like it's a weather report. Feelings come and go, just like the weather comes and goes. And like the weather, you can't change your feelings, but you can adapt the way you respond to it. What are some of the mindful activities that you do? You can type them in the chat box for some ideas for us. And we also did a 30-day mindfulness challenge just this last summer. Every day for 30 days, we posted the different mindful activities you could do each day. So we still have that posted and available. If you want access to that link and receive all 30 days of our mindfulness challenge, just type in mindfulness challenge or just mindfulness challenge is a lot to type in. Just type in mindfulness and we'll make certain that after the webinar, you receive that direct link so you can review all of those mindfulness activities and you'll be able to go through those activities that were posted this summer. And remember, our intent here is to become aware, become mindful of our internal dialogue and how that affects how we process information and how we respond. Now, Play Attention also has a mindfulness app called Lotus. Now, many of you here are current clients, and you may already have Lotus as part of your package. But if you have not yet incorporated that into your program, or if you have not yet started your Play Attention program and you're interested in our mindfulness program, this is a great way to develop mindfulness, because we hear so much about how mindfulness helps with the symptoms of ADHD. And that's true. However, we can't just look at someone with ADHD and say, now I want you to practice mindfulness, because mindfulness is hard. It's hard for all of us, but especially if you have a constant running mind. So what we do is we give you a visual representation of what it means to be in the present moment. So remember, whether you are a new client to Play Attention, or you've been looking at Play Attention and considering it for your practice or for your family, you'll be wearing the body wave armband. And remember, those sensors on the back are monitoring your brain activity that tells us how attentive you are. So with this particular program, once you have your mind in the present moment, you see a lotus flower in the middle of the screen, you're able to open that lotus flower, start opening a petal just with your mind alone. If you start thinking, what's for dinner? When's my next meeting? What time do I have to pick up the kids? That petal will start to close. You start that internal dialogue, the petal will start to close because you are no longer in the present moment. Then you have to bring yourself back in order to continue. So we're giving you constant and immediate feedback regarding your ability to stay in the present moment by monitoring your brain activity through our body wave system. And we're providing you with that constant and immediate feedback so that you're better able to develop mindfulness. Because I talk to so many people who will say, well, I tried mindfulness. I tried 10 minutes of mindfulness. And at the end of that 10 minutes, I had written my entire grocery list, right? Because they weren't self-monitoring, they weren't self-regulating and bringing themselves back to the mindfulness practice when they started to drift. With the body wave system, we're able to guide you back to your mindfulness. Okay. Joanna says, my mindfulness practices from indoors at a window, look outside at the weather, the trees. Is it windy still? Are there birds? It takes me out of my current agitated state, and then I can take a couple of breaths and breathe. Nice. Silence is so important. Excellent. That's very good, Joanna. Thank you for sharing that. If any of you are interested in incorporating Lotus into your Play Attention practice, if you are a current Play Attention client, then you can type in Lotus, and everyone here today will receive Lotus at half price. We'll make certain that you get that coupon code so that you can incorporate Lotus into your practice. So strong executive function allows you to control your emotions so they don't control you. That really summarizes what we've been talking about today, that in order to have emotion regulation, we have to improve executive function. We must get to the root cause and improve specific cognitive skills. Remember, all of these cognitive skills work together in order to help you process the information and respond appropriately. Okay. Now, if you're wondering, I don't know which cognitive skills I really need to improve, and you want more information, we do have assessments available where we can look at your attentional control and we can look at your executive function. So we have the focus, which is a norm reference test of attentional control, and it is computer-based. It takes 20 minutes. And at the end of the 20 minutes, we receive a full report that tells us how you performed compared to the performance of your peers. We also have the brief available, which is a behavior rating of executive function. And that is an online survey that asks you a series of questions and gives us a good snapshot of your executive function or your child's executive function on a day-to-day basis. I like to use that combination. So we have an objective assessment and a subjective assessment. And then if you do the assessments, we need about a 30-minute block of time to review the results and talk about those results and make a plan of action. How can we take those results and make a plan of action with play attention that will pinpoint those different cognitive skills and help you improve executive function, improve emotion regulation? So if you're interested in the assessments, each assessment is typically $50, but for all of our attendees here today, it's a buy one assessment and you can get one free. So that would allow you to buy maybe the focus assessment and get the brief for free. If you would like to do one of our assessments or you want more information, you want to take advantage of that buy one, get one. Remember, we need a 30-minute block of time to review. Just type in assessments and we'll reach out to you after the webinar to help you register for the assessments. And we can talk further about each assessment and what those look like. The assessments, someone's asking about age. We do recommend you're at least 5 years old, but you can go all the way up through adulthood. Okay, so just type in assessments and then we need that consultation follow-up. If you don't want an assessment and you just want a consultation to talk about your specific needs, type in consultation and we'll make certain to arrange a consultation with you as well. Now, these are all of the different cognitive skills that we can assess and also that we can address within play attention, because it's not enough to just assess the different areas that need to be improved. We have to have a plan of action to actually improve those cognitive skills, because that's the only way we're going to improve executive function, is to improve those cognitive skills that are required for strong executive function. And these are all of the different cognitive skills that we can address within your program. So when we look at play attention, we look at your assessments or simply talk to you about your specific needs, we can pinpoint the different cognitive skills that are most important for your program or your client's program or your students or your child's program. We can customize a program that is for each individual. Kim says that is what I've been lacking for my son. Do you mean how to actually address those cognitive skills? Is that what you're talking about, Kim? A plan of action. Exactly. And that's what I often hear. You know, I've been using play attention with my clients for 25 years, but a lot of times when I'm talking to individuals, they'll say, well, you know, we had a neuropsych evaluation and we have a 25-page report on all the things that are wrong or all the areas we need to improve, but now what? So Kim, that's exactly it. So we're going to take the information and make a plan. How do we improve these skills? And we do this in a very unique way in that we integrate that feedback technology where we're able to monitor your attention. We monitor your brain activity that tells us how attentive you are. And we integrate that with specific cognitive skill training and behavior shaping so that we can provide you with a very comprehensive approach to developing these cognitive skills that are required for strong emotion regulation and executive function. So just to summarize everything we've chatted about today, experiencing emotions is important. Being able to control our emotions so they don't overwhelm us should be our focus. We shouldn't focus on simply trying to avoid our emotions, suppress our emotions. We want to learn how to understand our emotions and control them. The brain is responsible, remember, for governing our emotions. Emotion regulation, as we've discussed, is a series of cognitive skills that work together. So you want to develop an emotion regulation plan. You can also work on that feelings folio to name those and identify those emotions, and also consider some mindfulness activities, because mindfulness can help you process incoming information and respond appropriately. So let's talk about some next steps. I really appreciate all of you being here today. I hope that this information gave you a different perspective, maybe on emotion regulation, perhaps a larger perspective on emotion regulation and how the brain works when it comes to monitoring and regulating those emotions. So let's talk about some next steps. One is that, remember, you can do an assessment if you want to look at what cognitive skills are most important for you to improve, or your child or your clients, in order to improve emotion regulation and executive function. Many of you have already typed in assessments, but if you haven't yet and you want to do that, just type in assessments. Also, you can schedule a consultation if you want to, if you don't necessarily need an assessment, because many of you have already done the assessments somewhere else, but you want to chat about those assessments and make a plan of action, then a consultation will be a good opportunity for us to chat about your specific needs. So you can type in consultation. If you do the assessment, then remember the consultation comes with that naturally. Or if you don't have time for the consultation, you can come to our next Play Attention webinar, which is not next week, but the following week. And that webinar on Play Attention 101, you'll see, is specifically about play attention, Play Attention's educational foundation, and how we customize each person's plan to help improve executive function and self-regulation. If you want to register for that webinar and you have not done that yet, please do type in webinar, and we'll make certain that we get you registered for that next webinar. And remember also, if you didn't type in mindfulness yet and you want access to that 30-day challenge we did this summer, just type in mindfulness and we'll make certain that you are sent the link for the mindfulness challenge. Oh, and I wanted to mention, after this webinar, I'm going to follow up and send the ebook that goes along with this webinar. So there will be an ebook that goes with this webinar, and I'll make certain that all of you who have attended today get that ebook in your email, hopefully pretty immediately after this webinar, if all the technology works correctly. Thank you so much, everyone. Remember, if you haven't typed in assessment, consultation, webinar, mindfulness, please do that now. Tanisha, thank you so much for attending. Thank you everyone for attending today. Thank you, Ron. Lotus, Les will reach out to you regarding Lotus. Okay, great. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Again, it has been a pleasure speaking with all of you. I always enjoy having you in my audience and discussing new topics. If there are ever any topics that we haven't covered that you really would like an upcoming webinar to address, you can always type those suggestions in our chat box or reach us through our online contact us form as well. Thank you so much, everyone. You have a great afternoon, and I look forward to seeing you again in a couple of weeks, or perhaps at an upcoming assessment. Take care.